Kill the wounded ones first. Let the others watch. Commander Tariq Haidari said it quietly, almost gently, like a man ordering coffee. Then his fighters moved through the smoke toward the fallen Rangers. Captain Ethan Walker pressed his back against burning concrete, 12 men pinned down, ammunition almost gone, and listened to his soldiers screaming for help on a radio that nobody was answering. Nobody was coming. Nobody could reach them in time. The Rangers had 1 minute left, maybe less. And Haidari was already lighting a cigarette. Before we go any further, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment right now telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let us go back to the moment everything fell apart. The first thing Captain Ethan Walker heard was not the explosion. It was the silence. 6 seconds, maybe 7. That particular kind of silence that does not feel like quiet at all. It feels like the world holding its breath, like the air itself knows something terrible is about to happen, and it is pulling back, gathering itself, giving you one final moment before everything you thought you understood about this mission gets torn apart at the seams. Ethan had been in combat long enough to know the difference between ordinary silence and the kind that precedes catastrophe. Ordinary silence is empty. It is just absence of sound. But this silence had weight. It had pressure. It pressed against his eardrums and sat in his chest like a stone, and somewhere in the back of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through 3 deployments and more firefights than he could count on both hands, that part was already screaming. Get down. He did not get down fast enough. The first explosion came from beneath the bridge, not beside it, not near it, beneath it. Planted there days before, maybe weeks, by hands that had known exactly where Ranger Team 41 would cross at exactly what time on exactly what night. The concrete buckled upward like something alive, like the earth itself was rejecting them, and the shockwave hit Ethan so hard across the chest that he lost 3 seconds of his life. Just gone. Erased. One moment he was walking, the next he was on the ground staring up at a sky filled with fire and debris and the sound of men screaming. He came back to himself, screaming a name. Mitchell, Mitchell, where are you? Sergeant Ryan Mitchell had been 2 steps ahead of him on that bridge. 2 steps. The difference between where Ethan was standing and where the blast centered was approximately 8 feet of concrete and the random chance of where a man puts his foot on a given Tuesday night in southern Afghanistan. Mitchell had been talking 30 seconds before the explosion, saying something about his daughter's birthday. She was turning 7. He had bought her a stuffed rabbit from a vendor outside the base, the kind with floppy ears, and he was worried it would get crushed in his pack on the way home. Ethan saw him fall. He saw it clearly. Mitchell was there, and then Mitchell was not there. And then Ethan was on his hands and knees on broken concrete with ringing in both ears and fire coming from 3 directions, and the sound of machine gun fire erupting from the buildings to the east, the west, and directly ahead. Contact left, contact left. RPG team on the roof. Northeast corner. Medic, I need a medic right now. The radio became a wall of voices. Every voice was controlled, professional, trained. These were Rangers, elite soldiers, men who had been in bad situations before and had found their way through. But Ethan heard something underneath the professional control, something he had never heard in his unit before. He heard fear, real fear. Not the manageable kind that sharpens your focus and makes your hands steady. The other kind. The kind that comes from understanding in a sudden and complete way that the situation you are in was not created by chance. It was created for you, designed around you, built specifically to ensure that you do not walk out the other side. Sergeant First Class Torres crawled to Ethan's position behind an overturned vehicle, his face cut across the left cheek, blood running down his jaw. Captain, his voice was completely flat. We have hostiles on all 4 sides. How many? Torres looked at him. A lot. How many, Torres? Enough. Torres met his eyes. They knew we were coming. They knew our route, our timeline, our number. Every position they have set up is zeroed in on our movement path. This is not a chance engagement, sir. This is a trap. Ethan looked around the bridge. He could see 11 of his 12 Rangers. Some were behind cover returning fire. One was pinned under the rear section of a destroyed vehicle alive, shouting that he was okay, that he just needed someone to pull the door off his leg. And Mitchell was somewhere behind them, and Ethan could not make himself look back at where Mitchell had fallen, because if he looked, he would know. And if he knew, he would not do what he needed to do in the next 30 seconds to keep anyone else from dying. "What is our extraction window?" Ethan said. "Command says 20 minutes minimum." 20 minutes. Ethan ran the math instantly, the way any commander does in a firefight, counting assets against threats against time. They had 11 functional shooters low on ammunition after the initial contact, no vehicle support, no air cover, no elevated positions. The enemy had the high ground on 3 sides, at least 2 heavy machine gun emplacements, and an RPG team that had already fired twice and missed only because Ranger reflexes are not entirely human. 20 minutes was not a window. 20 minutes was a sentence. "We cannot hold for 20 minutes. Torres said, not panicking, just reporting a fact the way you report weather or mileage. "Not in this position." "Then we move," Ethan said. "Move where every route is covered. That is the point." Ethan grabbed the radio handset. "All Rangers, this is Walker. We are moving to the warehouse structure on our 9 o'clock. Covering fire in 3-2. The machine gun opened up from the east building and put 30 rounds across the exact path they would have taken. Nobody moved. The enemy had anticipated the move before he made it. Torres looked at Ethan with an expression that said everything without saying anything. They knew. Not just the route, the response. They had wargamed this scenario. They had put themselves in Ethan Walker's position, in a Ranger commander's position, and they had planned for every rational choice he might make. This was not a fight. This was a test. And the people who designed the test had already decided what the answer would be. Corporal James Reeves low-crawled to Ethan's position from the left, arriving behind cover with 3 other Rangers stacked behind him. Reeves was 24 years old with a baby face and the eyes of someone 10 years older, and he looked at Ethan with a directness that other soldiers reserved for generals. "Captain, we need to talk about what is actually happening here." "Now is not the time, Reeves." "With respect, sir, now is exactly the time." Reeves did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice, which was part of what made people listen to him. "Someone gave us up. Someone with access to our route, our timing, our head count. This ambush was not assembled in an hour. The explosives under that bridge were planted days ago. The machine gun positions were established days ago. Somebody knew we were coming. We will deal with that later." "If there is a later, yes, sir, we will." The RPG team fired again. The round hit the wall above them, showering everyone with chunks of concrete and debris, and for a moment nobody could hear anything except ringing. When the world came back, Private Santos was saying something in Spanish, under his breath, quietly repeating it like a prayer. And Ethan realized it probably was a prayer, and he could not blame him one bit. The radio crackled. Command on the other end. "Ranger Team 41, we are mobilizing QRF, but weather is degrading. Expect revised extraction at 30 minutes, possibly longer. Can you hold?" Ethan looked at his team. He looked at the fire and the smoke and the dead ground between their position and any cover worth reaching. He looked at the building where the machine gun was positioned, where muzzle flashes lit the windows every 3 seconds. He looked at where Ryan Mitchell had fallen and forced himself finally to look, because he owed Mitchell that much. Mitchell was not moving. Ethan pressed the transmit button. "We will hold." He released the button. In a quieter voice, he said, "Everybody stay close. We are going to be here a while." Torres looked at him. "What is the plan?" "Survive." "That is not a plan, Captain." "Right now it is." The next 9 minutes were the longest of Ethan Walker's life. They held their positions. They returned fire with the discipline of soldiers who know that ammunition does not replenish itself by wishing. 3-round bursts. Targeted, measured, aimed at muzzle flashes and movement, not at walls. They communicated in short sentences, the kind that convey everything and waste nothing. They shifted position twice when the enemy tried to flank them from the south, and both times the flanking movement was anticipated and stopped, but stopping it cost them, and they could not keep paying that cost indefinitely. Private Santos had a graze wound across his left forearm that he had wrapped with a torn sleeve and not mentioned to anyone. Corporal Huang had taken a piece of shrapnel in the shoulder that was bleeding steadily, but had not hit anything that would kill him in the next 30 minutes, which was about as much grace as anyone could reasonably expect. Ranger Kowalski was still trapped under the vehicle door. He had stopped shouting that he was fine and started being quiet, which was actually more worrying. Ethan tried to reach him twice. Both times the machine gun from the east building put fire on the path between them and Kowalski's position. Precise fire, not suppressive spray, aimed, patient, methodical fire from someone who had probably killed more people with that weapon than Ethan had killed in his entire career. These were not irregular fighters making it up as they went. These were trained soldiers executing a carefully rehearsed plan. Their commander is someone who knows us, Ethan said mostly to himself. Torres heard him. Say again, Captain. Whoever is running this fight on their side, he knows how Rangers think. He knows our doctrine, Shoam. He knows how we move and how we react and what choices we make under pressure. Ethan paused. You only know that if you have studied us for a long time. Torres was quiet for a moment. Intel said there was a new enemy commander. Tariq Haidari. What do we know about him? Military trained, used to fight for someone else, switched in allegiances about 18 months ago, and started organizing independent groups under a unified command structure. He is the reason the contact rate went up 40% in this sector over the last year. A man who studies his enemies, Ethan said, which means he already knows what I am going to do next. Then what do we do? Something he does not expect, which is, Ethan genuinely did not have an answer for that, and they both knew it, and Torres nodded slowly as if the silence itself was a sufficient response to the situation they were in. The radio crackled again, not from command, from somewhere else. A frequency that nobody on the team had been broadcasting on. A frequency that, as far as Ethan Walker could determine in that moment, had no business carrying any signal at all on this particular night, in this particular corner of Kandahar province. A woman's voice? Calm, measured, completely unnervingly calm. Ranger Team 41, this is Shadow 6. I have eyes on your position. The effect on the team was immediate and total. Every Ranger who heard that transmission went still. Conversation stopped. Men who had been focused on their sectors turned slightly involuntarily toward the radio, which is the kind of thing you do not do in a firefight, and they all knew it and did it anyway. Nobody knew that call sign. Nobody knew that voice. Torres stared at the radio handset like it had just said something in a language he did not recognize. Ethan grabbed it. Shadow 6, identify yourself and authenticate. A pause. Not a long pause. Maybe 2 seconds. But 2 seconds feels very different when you are behind broken concrete with people shooting at you. I am someone who was sent to make sure you come home. That is not authentication, Shadow 6. Give me a code or get off this channel. I do not have your current codes. I was inserted separately. Check your 12 o'clock northwest corner, 4th floor window, far right. Nobody moved for a full second. Then Reeves said, Captain. Ethan looked. The 4th floor window on the northwest building was dark. Had been dark all night, but something about the way Reeves was looking at it made Ethan look a second time and then a third. There is someone in that window, Reeves said. That building has been cold all night, Torres said. It is not cold now. The radio again. Shadow 6. Still calm. Calm in a way that was starting to feel less eerie and more like something else. Something Ethan could not name yet. Captain Walker. The machine gun in the east building. 2nd floor, 3rd window from the left. He is about to shift position to take a better angle on your trapped soldier. You have about 40 seconds before he moves, and you will not be able to stop him. I need you to trust me for the next 36 seconds. Ethan made a decision. He would think about the logic of the decision later. In the moment, he made it the way soldiers make decisions in firefights, which is partly training and partly instinct, and partly something that does not have a clean name. Everyone hold, he said. Hold fire. Torres looked at him. Captain, hold. 22 seconds of silence. Then a single shot rang out from somewhere to the northwest. Not close. The sound had that particular quality of a round that has traveled far, where you hear the report slightly delayed from the impact, where the physics of long-distance shooting creates a tiny gap between cause and effect that you can feel if you know what to listen for. The machine gun in the east building went silent. Not paused. Silent. Someone grabbed a radio and started shouting in Pashto from inside the building. Urgent, confused, disorganized shouting. The kind that happens when a unit loses a key position unexpectedly and does not understand yet how it happened or where the threat is coming from. That, said Reeves very quietly, was a long shot. The radio crackled. Shadow 6. Machine gun is down. RPG team on the south rooftop is going to shift to cover the gap. You have a window of approximately 90 seconds. I recommend your medic gets to the trapped soldier in the vehicle. I will cover the route. Ethan did not hesitate this time. Doc, move. Torres, you are going with him. Captain, go. They went. Ethan watched them cross 20 feet of open ground that had been covered by enemy fire for the last 12 minutes. He watched it with his heart in his throat, which is an expression people use, but which felt physically accurate in that moment, because his heart was genuinely not where it was supposed to be. Nothing fired. They reached Kowalski. Doc pulled the door off Kowalski's leg, with Torres pulling from the other side and Kowalski making a sound that was somewhere between a curse and a gasp and something else, and then they were moving, the three of them coming back across the open ground. The RPG rooftop opened fire. The round hit 8 feet to their right. 8 feet. And then another shot rang out from somewhere to the northwest. Long, measured, patient. The RPG team on the roof did not fire again. Torres came back across the last 10 feet of open ground, carrying Kowalski under one arm, and he did not look at the roof where the RPG team had been, and he did not look at the east building where the machine gun had gone quiet. He looked at Ethan. Who is she? He said. Ethan did not have an answer. The radio again. Shadow 6. You have 7 enemy fighters attempting a new flanking move from the south. They will reach your position in 4 minutes if they are not stopped. I can handle 2 of them from my angle. The other 5 will need to be addressed by your team. I will mark their approach positions. How will you mark them? You will know. 4 minutes later, they knew. The next 45 minutes were unlike any combat engagement Ethan Walker had ever been part of. It was not a fight, or it was a fight, but it was a fight in which the terms had been completely restructured without anyone explicitly announcing a restructuring. The enemy had designed a perfect trap. They had planned for every response a Ranger commander might have. They had studied, rehearsed, and positioned themselves for a complete and total shutdown of everything Ethan's team could do. But they had not planned for this. They had not planned for a voice from nowhere that knew where they were going before they moved. A presence that did not show up on any frequency, that did not have authentication codes, that had no call sign in any database Ethan had access to, and that proceeded to systematically dismantle the enemy's perfectly constructed kill zone from a position so far away that the Rangers at the receiving end of her protection could not even determine with any confidence what direction the shots were coming from. They heard her work. They did not see it. She fired 11 times in 45 minutes. Every time the shot ended, something that had been about to cost Ranger Team 41 something they could not afford. A flanking team, a mortar position that had been setting up in a courtyard 200 meters south, a second machine gun that had been relocating, an enemy commander trying to reorganize his scattered fighters. 11 shots, 11 problems that stopped being problems. Between shots, she talked to them on the radio. Not constantly. She did not fill the silence with reassurance or chatter or anything that wasted time. She talked when she needed them to do something, and she gave them exactly the information they needed to do it, and then she was quiet again. At one point, Reeves got on the radio and said, "Shadow 6, what is your distance from our position?" A pause, then far enough. Far enough for what? For you not to worry about me. Torres leaned toward Ethan. She is enjoying this. No, she is not, Ethan said after a moment. She is focused. He had heard enough voices in enough firefights to know the difference. When the QRF finally arrived 17 minutes after the scheduled extraction window, they found Ranger Team 41 behind cover in a relatively stable position with minimal casualties and an enemy force that had largely pulled back in confused retreat. The QRF commander, a major named Henderson, looked around the area and then at Ethan and said with genuine confusion, "What happened here?" "We held," Ethan said. "You held. Against that." Henderson gestured at the evidence of the engagement around them. "With 12 men. 11 a hand," Henderson looked at him. "What?" "We lost 1, Ethan said. And he stopped talking because there was not anything useful to add to that. They brought Mitchell out on a stretcher. Ethan walked alongside it for a few steps, and then he stopped walking because he needed a moment, and he took it, and then he walked back to his team because that is what you do. In the helicopter on the way back to base, the radio stayed quiet. Ethan found himself listening for Shadow 6, for that voice, that particular quality of calm that he had never heard in a combat zone from anyone, male or female, at any rank in any unit. She did not speak again. At some point, Reeves handed him a piece of paper. Scrawled on it in Reeves's handwriting were the numbers he had calculated during the engagement. The furthest confirmed position Shadow 6 had fired from based on sound delay and trajectory estimates. Ethan looked at the number for a long time. Then he looked at Reeves. "That is not possible," he said. Reeves looked out the helicopter window. She did it anyway. Back at the base in the debrief, Colonel Marcus Reynolds sat at the head of the table with his hands folded and listened to Ethan's account of the night. He listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, Reynolds was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Shadow 6. You know that call sign?" Ethan said. It was not a question. Reynolds unfolded his hands and placed them flat on the table. "I know who carries it." "Who?" Reynolds looked at him with the expression of someone who is about to say something that will change how you understand the last several hours of your life. "Someone we sent ahead of you," Reynolds said. "Someone who has been in that sector for 18 days. Someone who I was told by multiple people was going to be impossible to use effectively in a high-intensity engagement because—" Reynolds paused. "Because of a number of assumptions that apparently needed to be reconsidered." "Sir," Ethan said, "who is Shadow 6? Reynolds reached into the folder in front of him and slid a single photograph across the table. Ethan looked at it. It was a personnel photo, standard military portrait, the kind that goes in a file. The subject was in uniform, looking directly at the camera with the kind of posture that says, this person is used to being looked at and has made a decision not to care about it. She looked young, younger than Ethan had somehow imagined from the voice, smaller. But the eyes were the eyes of someone who has spent a very long time looking at things very carefully from very far away and has learned in the process to see exactly what is there and exactly what is not. "Staff Sergeant Emily Carter," Reynolds said. "She, Precision Fire Specialist. She has been tracking enemy movements in your operational area for 18 days. Ethan looked at the photograph. Then at Reynolds. "She saved my team tonight," he said. "Yeah," Reynolds said simply. "She did." Ethan looked at the photograph one more time. He thought about Ryan Mitchell and his daughter's birthday and a stuffed rabbit with floppy ears that was still sitting in a pack somewhere. He thought about the voice on the radio, completely calm in the middle of a firefight, saying with quiet certainty, "I was sent to make sure you come home." He thought about 11 shots in 45 minutes. He thought about the number Reeves had calculated, the distance, the thing that was not supposed to be possible. "Where is she now?" Ethan said. Reynolds looked at the table. "Still out there." "Still?" Ethan stopped. "She is still in the field." "The mission is not finished," Reynolds said. "The man who set that ambush tonight is still out there. His network is still active. His operation is still running." Reynolds looked up. "And Emily Carter does not come in until the mission is finished." Ethan stared at him. "She is out there alone. She has a spotter. She is out there with one other person in a sector where we just got hit by what felt like 100 fighters, and she is—" Ethan put his hands on the table. "With respect, sir, what are we doing to bring her in?" Reynolds met his eyes. "The same thing she is doing for your people, Captain." "What is that?" "Trusting her," Reynolds said quietly, "to do her job." The room was silent. Ethan Walker looked at the photograph of Staff Sergeant Emily Carter for the third and last time that evening. Then he looked at his hands. And for the first time in many years, a man who had been trained to solve every problem plan for every contingency and maintain control of every situation under his command sat quietly in a room and trusted someone else to keep a promise he could not keep himself. She said she was sent to make sure they came home. He believed her. Out there in the dark, in a sector that had just tried to swallow 12 Rangers alive, Emily Carter was still watching, still waiting, still doing the job nobody else could do the way she could do it. And somewhere between the mountains and the stars over Kandahar, a single set of eyes behind a precision scope remained steady against the night-counting breaths, reading when, and keeping a promise that nobody had asked her to make out loud. 3 weeks before Ranger Team 41 walked onto that bridge, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter was standing in a hallway outside Colonel Marcus Reynolds' office at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, listening to two men on the other side of the door talk about her like she was not 30 feet away. She was not eavesdropping. She had simply arrived 4 minutes early for a meeting, which was a habit she had developed long ago because her mentor, Daniel Hayes, had once told her that a person who arrives late to a conversation has already lost the first exchange. So she arrived early, and the door was not fully closed, and the two men inside were not being particularly quiet. She is 28 years old, the first voice said. 28. You want to send her into a sector that just chewed through two experienced teams. Her record speaks for itself, Reynolds said. Her record is on a range. Controlled conditions. Verified targets at verified distances with verified wind data. That is not the same as embedding in a hot sector for 3 weeks with one spotter and no backup protocol. Her confirmed long-distance engagements include 4 real-world. I know what her file says, Marcus. I wrote part of her evaluation. She is exceptional in her category. She is probably the best pure precision shooter we have produced in this unit in 5 years. But there is a difference between exceptional and ready for this specific assignment. This is not a range qualification. This is a sustained solo operation in a sector where Haidari's people are actively hunting our assets. Reynolds was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you finished?" A pause. "Not quite. She is also..." "Choose your next word carefully, General." Another pause. Longer. "I am saying that the optics of inserting a female operator into a primary overwatch role for a Ranger rescue mission are complicated. If something goes wrong, Reynolds said, and his voice had dropped to a register that Emily had learned in her career meant a senior officer was working very hard to remain professional. Then we will deal with what went wrong. We will not deal with the gender of the person we sent. Is that understood?" Emily stepped back from the door. She put her back against the wall of the hallway and looked at the ceiling and took one slow breath. She had been having versions of this conversation or listening to versions of this conversation for the entirety of her military career. She was not angry. She had passed through angry years ago and come out the other side into something more useful, which was determined. Anger wastes energy. Determination spends it on something worth buying. She straightened her uniform. She knocked on the doorframe. "Staff Sergeant Carter," Reynolds said immediately. "Come in." The general, whose name Emily had not caught, was a broad man in his late 50s with the bearing of someone who had made his reputation in a different era of warfare and was not entirely comfortable with how the current era was developing. He looked at Emily when she entered with an expression she recognized perfectly. It was the expression of a man recalibrating expectations in real time and not enjoying the process. Emily stood at attention and did not help him with his recalibration. Reynolds gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Sergeant." She sat. Reynolds slid a folder across the desk. "You have been briefed on the situation in Kandahar province." "Generally, sir, I would like specifics." "That is what the folder is for." Emily opened it. She did not skim it. She read it properly from the beginning, while Reynolds and the general sat across from her and waited. She read the casualty reports first because those were the most important. Numbers told you what had happened. Patterns told you why. She counted the engagements noted, the locations, noted the timing intervals, and by the 3rd page she had already started seeing something that the reports themselves did not explicitly state. She turned to the map section. She looked at it for 90 seconds without speaking. Then she said, "He is not random." Reynolds leaned forward slightly. "Say again." "Haidari, these attacks are not opportunistic. They are not even primarily tactical." She pointed at 3 locations on the map. This cluster here, and this one 14 days later, and this one 6 days after that, he is not hitting the highest value targets each time. He is hitting the targets that teach him the most. He is running experiments. The general shifted in his chair. Sergeant, enemy commanders do not run experiments. They run operations. Emily looked at him directly. "With respect, sir, that is the assumption Haidari is counting on." She looked back at the map. "He hit the convoy here, not because the supplies were valuable, but because it forced the QRF to respond, and he watched how they responded. He hit the observation post here, not to destroy the post, but to see how long it took command to recognize the position was compromised and how they adjusted their patrol patterns afterward. He is collecting data." She paused. "He has been studying us for at least 8 months. The room was quiet. Reynolds said, "Can you stop him?" Emily looked at the photographs of the engagement sites. She looked at the casualty numbers. She looked at the timeline. She said, I can find him. Finding him and stopping him are not the same thing. No, sir, they are not. But you cannot stop something you cannot find. Find him first. Everything else follows from that. Reynolds looked at the general. The general looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at Emily with an expression that had shifted slightly from recalibration into something closer to reluctant attention. What do you need? Reynolds said. My spotter, Sergeant Michael Hayes. He is the only person I work with who does not talk when I am thinking. Done. What else? 18 days, no check-in requirements that could compromise position. I will report when I have something worth reporting. Command will want regular contact. Command wanting something and command needing something are two different problems. Regular contact in a compromised sector gets people killed. I will report when I have something worth saying. Reynolds almost smiled. Anything else? Emily looked at the map one final time. Yes, she said. Keep sending Rangers into the sector. The general made a sharp sound. Absolutely not. We are not using soldiers as bait. I'm not suggesting bait, Emily said. I am suggesting that if Ranger operations in the sector stop, Haidari will know something changed. He will go quiet. He will move his network. We will lose the pattern. She looked at Reynolds. I need him to keep doing what he is doing so I can learn it well enough to predict it. If everything changes, I lose my map. The general stood up. This is an extraordinary request from a staff sergeant. It is an extraordinary situation, sir. He left the room without another word. Reynolds looked at Emily for a long moment after the door closed. Then he said simply, Come home, Sergeant. Emily picked up the folder. Yes, sir. She stood turned toward the door and then stopped. Colonel? Sergeant. The general in that meeting. He said something before I came in. She paused. About optics. Reynolds said nothing. I want you to know, Emily said without heat, without drama, simply as a statement of fact, that if I do my job correctly, no one will ever know I was there, which means the optics will not be a problem. She looked at him, and if I do not do my job correctly, the optics will be the least of anyone's concerns. She walked out. Sergeant Michael Hayes was waiting in the hallway. He was 31, compact, quiet, with a habit of observing everything and commenting on very little, which was exactly the quality Emily valued most in a spotter. He had worked with her for 2 years. He had never once in 2 years told her to slow down or be careful in a way that implied he doubted her judgment. He had told her to slow down twice, and both times he had been right, and she had listened, and they had not died because of it, which was a good track record. He looked at her when she came out of the office. How did it go? We leave in 48 hours. That is not what I asked. Emily started walking. It went the way it always goes. Hayes fell into step beside her. Did anyone use the word optics in there? Emily did not answer, which was itself an answer. Hayes nodded once. Right, 48 hours. I will get the kits sorted. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Hayes said, I looked at the preliminary sector reports last night. And Haidari is good, Hayes said. Genuinely good. Not good like someone who got lucky twice. Good like someone who was trained well and has spent a significant amount of time in the field applying what he learned. I know. He is going to figure out we are there, maybe not immediately, but eventually. I know that too. What is the plan for when that happens? Emily thought about it for exactly as long as the question deserved. Be better than him by then. Hayes considered this. That is a very short plan. Most good plans are. The flight to Afghanistan took 14 hours. Emily spent most of it looking at maps and reports and imagery she had requested from intelligence. Hayes slept for 6 of the 14 hours, which was the right thing to do, and which Emily could not make herself do because her brain would not stop moving. This was not anxiety. She had learned years ago to distinguish between productive mental activity and anxiety, and what she was doing was productive. She was building a model. Every piece of information she absorbed was a brick in a structure she was constructing. Inside her mind, a 3-dimensional map of Haidari's operation, his habits, his thinking, the shape of how he made decisions. She had done this before, with other targets, in other places. The targets changed, but the fundamental work was always the same, which was to understand another human mind well enough to predict what it would do before it did it. She was very good at this. What she did not tell Reynolds, what she had not told almost anyone, was that she was also afraid. Not afraid of Haidari, not afraid of the sector or the mission parameters or the risk of operating with limited support in a compromised area. She was afraid of something smaller and more specific and more difficult to discuss. She was afraid of being too late. It had happened once before, not in combat, not on a mission. It had happened years earlier in a hospital in Georgia where her brother David had died of injuries sustained during a mission because the extraction team that was supposed to reach him had been delayed by a communications failure that nobody caught in time. By the time anyone arrived, David Carter had been alone for 4 hours with wounds that were survivable if addressed and fatal if ignored. He had been 26 years old. Emily had been 22. She had never spoken about David in a professional context. She had never listed his death as a motivation during interviews or evaluations or the psychological assessments that every special operations adjacent role required. She did not use his death as fuel the way some people use grief. She used it as a standard, a marker, the thing she measured every decision against. Am I getting there in time? That was the question. Not am I good enough, not can I make the shot, not will I be afraid. Just am I getting there in time? She fell asleep somewhere over the Atlantic, finally with a photograph of David tucked inside the front cover of the notebook she always carried. She did not look at it. She did not need to. She knew it was there. They arrived. The sector was everything the reports had said, and several things the reports had not captured, because reports are written by people who come and go and cannot fully convey what a place feels like when you are inside it. What Emily felt in the first 24 hours was the weight of something organized, something patient. The enemy presence in the sector did not feel chaotic. It did not feel like a collection of independent groups making independent decisions. It felt coordinated. It felt like a system. She said this to Hayes on their second night in position. A system has patterns, Hayes said. Every system has patterns. That is what makes it a system. And patterns can be mapped. Give me 10 days, Emily said. I will have his map. She had it in 8. The first thing she identified was the observation network. Haidari was not relying on fighters for intelligence. He was using civilians, not coerced civilians or not primarily. He was using people who believed in what he was doing, people who had reasons that Emily did not judge and did not need to understand. People who watched the roads and the skies and the movement of American vehicles and reported what they saw through a chain of communication that was neither radio nor telephone, but something older and more reliable and much harder to intercept. She identified the chain. She did not break it. Breaking it would tell Haidari something had changed. The second thing she identified was the command rhythm. Haidari made decisions at specific times, not because he was predictable, but because coordination at his scale required synchronization, and synchronization required timing. And timing created a pulse that Emily could learn to feel if she was patient enough. She was patient enough. On day 4, she identified his primary command position. She did not act on it. She filed it and kept watching. On day 6, she identified the sniper team Haidari was using as his primary offensive tool against Ranger patrols. 2 men extremely skilled working in a rotating pattern that made them difficult to locate through conventional methods. Emily located them in 11 hours using a method that was not in any manual, which was to look not for where they were, but for where they were not, because a sniper team that good would never be where you expected them. And the shape of their absence told you more than their presence would have. She filed that too. On day 8, Hayes said, "You have enough to call in a strike package and end this." Emily looked at the map she had been building in her notebook. Not yet. Emily. He almost never used her first name in the field. We have his command position, his communication network, his primary offensive asset. What else do you need? The trap he is setting for Ranger Team 41. Hayes went very still. What? He is running an operation right now. Something big, something he has been building toward for weeks. She pointed at several entries in the notebook. Look at the timing of the observation reports over the last 10 days. He is tracking something specific. He is learning a specific route, a specific team, a specific patrol rhythm. She looked at Hayes. He is building an ambush, a real one, not a pressure plate on a road, something architectural, something designed to eliminate an entire team at once. Do we know which team? Emily looked at the intelligence reports she had requested, the patrol schedules for the next 72 hours, the rescue operation that had been authorized 2 days ago. Team 41, she said. Hayes stared at her. How long before the operation? 72 hours, maybe less. We need to warn command. I have already sent a report. And Emily's jaw tightened slightly, and command assessed it as inconclusive. The silence between them had a texture. Inconclusive, Hayes said. There is a rescue operation with a narrow extraction window, and intelligence is that 3 Americans are alive behind enemy lines. Command is not going to cancel it based on a pattern analysis from a 2-person Overwatch team that has not made direct contact in 8 days. So what do we do? Emily looked at the map. She looked at the route Ranger Team 41 would take. She looked at the bridge they would cross and the buildings around it and the positions she had already identified as likely staging points for Haidari's ambush. She looked at the distance from her current position to the critical angle points of that engagement zone. She did the math. It was a very long distance. It was if she was being honest with herself, farther than she had ever attempted in a real engagement. On a range, she had made shots at this distance under controlled conditions. In the field, the variables multiplied in ways that could not be fully calculated in advance. Wind shift, temperature change, humidity. The wobble introduced by physical fatigue and elevated heart rate and the specific kind of pressure that came from knowing that a miss was not a missed score but a missed life. She did the math again. Tell me it is doable, Hayes said. It is doable. Tell me you are sure. Emily looked at him. I am sure enough. Those are 2 different things. Yes, she said, they are. She looked back at the map. Get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow we move into position. Hayes did not move immediately. He sat with his hands on his knees looking at the floor of the space they were occupying, and Emily could tell he was running his own calculations. Not ballistic calculations, different ones. The kind of calculation a person runs when they are deciding whether to say something that might not be welcome. Your brother, he said quietly. Emily's hands stopped moving on the map. I know you do not talk about him, Hayes said. I know it is not something you bring into the field. But I have worked with you for 2 years, and I know what drives the way you make decisions, and I want to say something once and then never bring it up again. Emily waited. David would not want you to take an impossible shot because of him. Emily was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, it is not an impossible shot. Emily, it is a very difficult shot. She finally looked at him. There is a difference. Impossible means it cannot be done. Very difficult means it has not been done yet under these conditions by this person. She held his gaze. I am this person, and I have been preparing for this specific type of engagement at this specific distance range for 3 years. Not because of David, because if I am going to do this job, I am going to do it at the limit of what is possible, or I am not doing it right. Hayes looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once. I will get some sleep, he said. He lay down on his side and was asleep in 6 minutes, which was a skill Emily had always envied, that specific soldier's ability to turn off like a switch when the body needs it, regardless of what the mind is carrying. Emily stayed awake. She did not stay awake from anxiety. She stayed awake because she had more work to do. She went through the map again. Every position, every angle, every variable she could pre-calculate. She worked through the engagement in her mind the way an athlete works through a performance, not in hope or fear, but in preparation, building the muscle memory of a decision she had not yet made, so that when the moment came, the decision would already be made, and what remained would be only execution. She thought about the 12 Rangers who would walk onto that bridge in 68 hours. She thought about their families. She thought about a stuffed rabbit with floppy ears, which she did not know about, could not have known about, but which existed in some pack, in some barracks room, in a base outside Kandahar, waiting to make a 7-year-old girl happy. She thought about David, not with grief. Grief was for other times and other places. She thought about David the way she always thought about him when it mattered, which was as a reason. Not a reason to be reckless. Not a reason to take risks that served her feelings rather than the mission. A reason to be good. A reason to be good enough that the thing that happened to him would not happen to someone else while she was in a position to prevent it. That was the only promise she had ever made, that she intended to keep regardless of cost. At 3 a.m, she picked up her radio. She opened the secure channel. She entered a call sign that did not exist in any database at Fort Liberty, that had not been issued by any communications officer, that she had created herself for a specific purpose. She keyed the transmit button. "Shadow 6 is in position," she said to no one who was listening yet. "I have eyes on the engagement zone. Ranger Team 41, when you need me, I will be here." She released the button. The radio did not respond. She had not expected it to. She looked through her scope at the dark city below, the bridge, the buildings, the positions she had mapped over 8 days of watching. Somewhere in that city, Tariq Haidari was also awake, probably looking at his own maps, probably running his own calculations, probably confident, justifiably confident, based on everything he had planned, that in 68 hours he was going to eliminate an entire Ranger team and send a message that would echo through the American military command for months. He was not wrong that he had built something impressive. He was wrong about one thing: he did not know she was there. And when the bridge erupted and the guns opened up and 12 Rangers found themselves inside the trap he had spent weeks constructing with such patience and care and genuine tactical intelligence, the one variable Tariq Haidari had not accounted for, could not have accounted for, was a woman lying very still in a position 2,000 meters away, breathing slowly, looking through a scope at the fourth-floor window, where his best shooter was preparing to do what he had been trained to do. She had been lying there for 6 hours already. She would lie there for as long as it took, because a sniper is not made by the ability to pull a trigger. A sniper is made by the ability to wait. And Emily Carter had learned to wait longer than anyone who had ever tried to outlast her. The 68 hours passed, then 67. Then the hours became minutes, and the minutes became the particular quality of silence that precedes catastrophe. And somewhere on a bridge in Kandahar province, 12 Rangers were crossing concrete over a river in the dark, moving with the trained efficiency of soldiers who do not yet know that the ground beneath their feet was mined 6 days ago by hands that had known exactly where they would walk. Emily Carter looked through her scope. She found the fourth-floor window. She found the shooter. She steadied her breathing. She waited for the moment that was coming. And when Ranger Team 41's world exploded into fire and case and the radio filled with desperate voices, when Ethan Walker grabbed his handset and called for support that was 20 minutes away, when the word went out across a burning bridge that they were surrounded and running out of time and running out of options, Emily Carter was already there. She had been there for 6 hours. She pressed the transmit button. "Ranger Team 41, this is Shadow 6. I have eyes on your position." She heard the silence on the other end. 12 soldiers going still at a voice they did not recognize, on a frequency that was not supposed to carry any signal tonight. Then Ethan Walker's voice. Controlled. Tense. The voice of a man holding 11 other lives in his hands and not dropping them. "Shadow 6, identify yourself." Emily looked through her scope at the fourth-floor window. The shooter inside had just shifted his angle toward the vehicle where Kowalski was trapped. She had maybe 30 seconds before he had a clean line. "I am someone who was sent to make sure you come home," she said. She heard Walker start to respond with something about authentication. She was already not listening. She was already inside the calculation. Wind from the northwest at 4 miles per hour gusting to 7. Temperature drop of 3 degrees from baseline, creating slight density altitude variance. Distance to target, 1,840 meters. Elevation angle -2 degrees. Target in intermittent cover behind window frame. Exposed for approximately 4 to 6 seconds when repositioning. She breathed out. She waited for the bottom of the breath. She fired. The shot traveled 1,840 meters in just over 2 seconds. The fourth-floor window went dark, and in the burning ruins of an ambush that was supposed to have no survivors, 12 American Rangers heard a single gunshot from somewhere impossibly far away, and the machine gun that had been killing them went silent, and for 1/2 second that felt like a long time. Everyone on that bridge understood that something had changed. Someone had answered. Someone had been there all along. The shot that silenced the machine gun lasted 2 seconds in the air and changed everything on the ground. Captain Ethan Walker heard the enemy position go quiet and spent exactly 1 second processing what that meant before his training took over. And he was already moving, already calling positions, already doing the job. But underneath the trained responses, underneath the commands and the radio traffic and the immediate tactical decisions, something had shifted in the way the fight felt. Not safer, not easier, just different. The way a room feels different when someone walks in who knows what they are doing. Hayes heard it too from his position beside Emily. The change in the radio traffic from Ranger Team 41. Voices that had been tight with controlled fear were still tight, still controlled, but the quality had shifted, not relaxed, recalibrated. They heard it, Hayes said quietly. Emily was already reacquiring the next target. Good. You have the RPG team on the south rooftop repositioning. I see them. They are going to fire in about 40 seconds. I know. Hayes watched her settle. He had watched her do this hundreds of times on ranges, dozens of times in real engagements, and it never stopped being something he could not fully describe to people who asked him what it was like to work beside the best shooter he had ever seen. It was not mechanical. It was not robotic. It was actually the opposite. Most people assume precision required the elimination of the human element, the flattening of the person into a machine, the removal of everything messy and emotional and alive. Emily Carter was proof that this was wrong. She was completely present. Everything about her was present. The steadiness was not the absence of feeling. It was feeling that had been so thoroughly organized that it became useful. She fired. The RPG team on the south rooftop stopped moving. 40 seconds later, on the radio, Ethan Walker's voice less tight. All Rangers moved to secondary position. Now, move. Hayes said they are moving. I can see them. Emily, the flanking team from the south. I count 7. I count 8. Hayes looked again. Found the 8th man pressed against a wall in shadow that would have hidden him from most spotters. 8, right. What is your angle on them? I have 2 clean. The others need to go around the corner before I can address them. Time until they turn the corner. 90 seconds. Tell Walker he needs to hold for 90 seconds and then push his left flank hard immediately after I fire. He will have a 6-second window. Hayes got on the secondary radio. He relayed the information in exactly the words Emily had used because Emily's words were precise and precision mattered. Walker acknowledged, asked no questions. A good commander under pressure does not ask questions when the information is complete. 90 seconds. Emily fired twice. 2 of the 8 went down. The remaining 6 turned the corner and entered her line of sight, and she fired 4 more times in the space of 11 seconds, which Hayes had never seen her do in a live engagement. 4 shots that fast, and every one of them found what it was looking for. On the radio, Walker's voice, left flank push, push now. Rangers moved. Nobody fired on them. Hayes exhaled. Emily was already scanning for the next problem. Mortar team, she said, courtyard 200 meters south of the bridge, setting up. Hayes found them. They are not in my earlier survey. They moved into position in the last 30 minutes. Haidari adjusted his plan, Emily said. He knows something is wrong with his east position. He is compensating. He is going to figure out where you are. Not yet. He does not have enough information yet. She was already adjusting her scope. The mortar is the priority. I'm sorry, priority. If they get 1 round off in the current Ranger position, it will cost us. She fired. The mortar team scattered. The tube was unmanned. She put a 2nd round through the base plate to destroy the equipment, which was the kind of decision that demonstrated the difference between shooting at people and understanding an engagement. Because a scattered mortar team can regroup, but a destroyed base plate takes the mortar out of the fight permanently. Hayes wrote the time in his notebook. 22 minutes into the engagement, Emily had fired 9 times in the entire shape of what Haidari had built over weeks of careful preparation was coming apart at the joints. Captain Walker is asking for your position again, Hayes said, checking the radio. Tell him what I told him before. He is going to keep asking. I know. Tell him anyway. Hayes keyed the radio. Shadow 6 is not providing position data at this time. Focus on your movement, Captain. A pause, then Walker. Can she hear me directly? Hayes looked at Emily. Emily glanced at the secondary radio and nodded once. Hayes handed it across. Walker's voice came through. Shadow 6, I want you to know that whatever you are doing out there, you are keeping my people alive. I do not know who you are. I do not know where you are. But I want you to know that we see you. Every one of us sees you. Emily looked through her scope. She found a new threat on the eastern building, a 2nd-floor window that had been dark and was now showing movement. She said, keep your people moving north. You have a gap forming in the eastern coverage. Do not stop. She handed the radio back to Hayes. Hayes watched her put the 2nd shot into the eastern window. You could have said something to him, Hayes said. I did say something to him. Something personal. Emily was already scanning. Personal is for after. Hayes knew what after meant to Emily. After meant when everyone was still alive. After was the only time personal was safe to be. The engagement continued. What happened over the next 30 minutes was the kind of thing that does not translate well into reports or briefings or the language that gets used in after-action reviews, which is a language of positions and distances and confirmed kills and tactical assessments. It translates badly because what was actually happening was not primarily tactical. What was actually happening was a conversation, a very long distance, very high-stakes conversation between Emily Carter and Tariq Haidari, conducted not in words but in moves and counter-moves in the particular intelligence of two people who were both in their different ways the best at what they did. Haidari adjusted. Emily answered his adjustment. Emily's answer created a problem. Haidari solved the problem. Haidari's solution opened a gap. Emily moved into the gap. This went on for 30 minutes. Hayes tracked it. He had a notation system he had developed over 2 years of working with Emily, a shorthand that let him record engagements in real time without losing the thread. And what the notation showed when he looked at it afterward was not a series of independent shots, but a single continuous response to a single continuous threat. Emily was not reacting to individual problems. She was managing a system. She was inside Haidari's decision cycle, anticipating his responses before he made them, and responding to the responses before they became problems. It was the 8 days of watching that made it possible. At 31 minutes, something changed. The enemy radio traffic, which Hayes was monitoring on a captured frequency, shifted tone. The voices became faster, not panicked. These were trained soldiers and they did not panic easily, but faster. The cadence of people who have encountered something they had not planned for and are working urgently to reclassify what kind of problem it is. Then a single voice cut through the traffic, calm, authoritative, speaking Pashto in the measured tones of someone who does not raise his voice because he does not need to. Hayes said, "That is Haidari." Emily stopped scanning. "What is he saying?" Hayes listened. His Pashto was functional rather than fluent enough to catch meaning, if not every nuance. "He is telling them to stop exposing assets. He says," Hayes paused, making sure he had it right. "He says there is a counter-sniper. He knows you are there." Emily was quiet for 2 seconds. Then she said, "He figured it out faster than I expected." "Is that a problem?" "It changes things." "How?" Emily looked through her scope at the city below. Positions that had been active 3 minutes ago were now going still. Haidari was pulling his assets back, consolidating, removing targets from her line of sight. He was making himself harder to address, and at the same time he was almost certainly now redirecting resources toward finding her. "He is going to send a team to locate my position," Emily said. "How long do we have?" "He has to figure out my general direction first. Based on the trajectory of the shots he has experienced, he can narrow it to a roughly 40-degree window on the northwest. Within that window, he is looking for elevated positions with line of sight to the bridge." She was already calculating. 45 minutes, maybe an hour if his team is cautious. "We need to move." "Not yet. Walker's team needs 12 more minutes before they reach the extraction point. If we move now, I lose the angle on the south approach, and Haidari will push through the south approach the moment he detects we have shifted." "Emily, if Haidari's team finds our position, they will not find it in 12 minutes. Hayes looked at her. "You are sure, I am sure enough." He had heard those exact words before, less than 48 hours ago in a different conversation about a different calculation. He had accepted them then. He accepted them now because Emily Carter sure enough had a track record that justified the faith. But he kept his own weapon ready. 38 minutes into the engagement, Walker's team hit a problem nobody had predicted. The extraction route that should have been clear was not clear. A secondary enemy unit, not part of Haidari's primary ambush force, but a patrol that had been in the area for unrelated reasons and had moved toward the sound of the fighting, had placed themselves directly across the path Walker needed to take in the next 4 minutes. Walker's voice on the radio, Shadow 6. "I have a blocking element on my extraction route, 8 to 10 fighters. I cannot go through them and I cannot go around. The alternate route is covered. What do I have?" Hayes plotted the position. He looked at Emily. The blocking element was at an angle that was problematic from their current position. Not impossible. problematic. I can take 3 of them from here, Emily said. Maybe 4. The rest will be behind cover before I can cycle. That leaves 6. 5 or 6. Walker's team can handle 5 or 6 if they hit them hard and fast right after I fire. There will be a 3 to 4 second window of confusion. That is a short window. It is enough window for Rangers. She got on the radio. Captain Walker? On my shot, you push through with everything you have. You do not stop. You do not return fire unless you have a clean target you run. Do you understand, Walker? Understood. Ready. Emily adjusted. New angle. New distance calculation. Wind had shifted in the last few minutes now, coming more from the west than northwest, which required a compensation. She worked out in 3 seconds from feel as much as calculation, the kind of correction that comes from having made this specific type of adjustment so many times that the math lives in the hands rather than the head. She fired 4 times, as fast as she had ever fired in a live engagement. Walker's team moved. Hayes watched through his own optic as the Rangers crossed the open ground. 30 feet, 40. The remaining enemy fighters scrambled for their weapons, confused, looking for the source of the fire, not looking at the ground in front of them. The Rangers went through them like a fist. 15 seconds of brutal close-range contact, the kind of fighting that Ranger training exists to produce, the kind of fighting that whatever else is happening around it comes down to the oldest question in combat: who wants it more? Ranger Team 41 wanted it more. They were through. Walker's voice, "We are through. Moving to extraction point. Shadow 6, we are clear." They demur. Hayes looked at Emily. Emily was already sweeping back toward the main engagement zone, checking for secondary threats, doing the job even now. "They are clear," Hayes said. Emily nodded. She did not stop sweeping. "Emily, they are clear. Walker's team is going to make it." She kept sweeping. Hayes understood. Clear did not mean safe. Clear meant clear right now, and right now had a duration measured in seconds. And until those seconds became minutes, and the minutes became distance, and the distance became a helicopter, and the helicopter became a base, nothing was actually clear. She kept watching until she heard the helicopter. When the sound of the rotors reached her, she did not celebrate. She did not exhale dramatically. She simply stopped swiping and looked at Hayes. "We need to move," she said. "Haidari's team will have a position on us in the next 12 minutes. They moved. Not running. Running was for people who were panicking or who had not planned. They moved quickly and with purpose, breaking down their position as they went, removing every trace of their presence the way Emily had been trained to do, because a position that can be identified can be studied, and a position that can be studied tells the enemy something about how you think. She did not want Haidari to know how she thought. Not yet. They were 300 meters from their previous position when Hayes's radio picked up traffic that stopped him mid-step. "What?" Emily said without turning. "Haidari." Hayes listened. "He is talking about the counter-sniper again." A pause. More listening. "He says..." Hayes's face changed. "He says he recognizes the pattern." Emily stopped. Turned. "What pattern?" "The shot sequencing. The prioritization of targets. He says he has seen this before." Hayes looked up from the radio. "Emily, he says he knows who you are." The air between them went very still. "That is not possible," Emily said. "He is describing your methods, specifically. He is telling his team what to look for. He says the shooter neutralizes command and control assets before direct threats, which is not standard doctrine. He says the shooter addresses equipment as well as personnel, which limits a lot of shooters." Hayes paused. "He says the distance is consistent with someone he has been tracking for a year." Emily stared at him. "He has been tracking me. Not you specifically. He has been tracking a pattern of engagements in 3 different sectors over the last 14 months. 14 incidents where enemy assets were neutralized by a shooter whose methods matched yours. He thought it was multiple shooters. He is revising that assessment right now." The weight of this settled over Emily in a way that was unfamiliar. She had operated in the belief, the reasonable and professionally grounded belief, that she was unknown, that she was a ghost, that the invisibility which was fundamental to everything she did had held. The discovery that it had not held, that someone on the other side had been studying the shadow she cast the way she had been studying his, was something she needed a moment with. Hayes gave her the moment. Then she said, "He figured it out from the pattern." "Yes. Which means he knows how I think." Enough to know how to look for you, which means our margin just got smaller. Yes, Emily started walking again. Faster now. How many people does he have looking? He sent 2 teams, 6 people each. Directions? Hayes relayed the information from the radio traffic. Emily listened and plotted it in her head against the terrain she had memorized over 8 days. The search teams were heading toward the right general area, but moving in a pattern that would take them to the most obvious elevated positions first. Emily was not in an obvious position, but she would need to be eventually to finish what she had started, because Tariq Haidari was still out there. The ambush had collapsed. Walker's team was going to make it. But Haidari himself, the man who had built the network, who had spent months studying American tactics, who had just demonstrated that he was capable of analyzing her the way she analyzed targets, Haidari had not been addressed. He would rebuild. He would study tonight's engagement the way a scientist studies an experiment. He would learn from it. He would find her pattern fill the gap she had exploited. And in 6 weeks, or 8 weeks, or 3 months, another Ranger team would find itself on another bridge. She could not let that happen. But the problem, the real problem, she had been not thinking about for the last 3 hours because there was too much else to think about, was this: she did not know where Haidari was. She had identified his command position 8 days ago. She had watched it for 48 hours. She knew his pattern, his schedule, his timing. But in the hours before the ambush launched, something had changed. Haidari had moved. He had anticipated, or simply exercised the natural caution of a man who had survived long enough to develop good instincts that a critical operation required him not to be in his expected location. He was somewhere in the city. She did not know where. They found a secondary position as dawn began to push against the dark at the eastern edge of the sky. Emily settled in. Hayes set up his scope beside her. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, which was the kind of silence that had a specific meaning between them. The silence of 2 people who are both running the same problem and letting the other one run it without interruption. Finally, Hayes said, he is going to go back to his command position. Not immediately. No, but eventually. He needs to assess the damage. He needs to understand what happened tonight. He is going to need his maps, his reports, his records. He cannot do that assessment from a secondary location indefinitely. How long? How long would you wait in his position? Emily thought about it. Until I was sure the immediate threat had cleared. Until I had confirmed the sniper had either withdrawn or moved far enough to lose the angle. She looked at Hayes. He is going to wait until he thinks I am gone. And then go back. Yes. How do we convince him you are gone? Emily looked at the sky, which was beginning to show the first gray suggestion of morning. We go quiet, she said, completely quiet. No shots, no radio, nothing that gives him a data point for the next, she calculated, 8 hours. 8 hours of nothing while his search teams are working. If we do not give them anything to find, eventually he recalls them. And then he goes back to his command position. And then I finish it. Hayes absorbed this. 8 hours in a sector where 6-person teams are actively looking for us. Yes, with no radio contact with command. Command will be concerned, but command cannot come looking for us without confirming to Haidari that we are still here. Emily. Hayes said her name in the particular way that meant he was about to say something important that she would not enjoy hearing. If something goes wrong in those 8 hours, if we get located, if we have to move fast and we lose our angle on the command position, if Haidari does not follow the pattern you are predicting, we could be sitting here in silence for 8 hours and come out the other end with nothing. Yes, Emily said. That is all you have. Yes. I also have, I do not see another way to reach him. She met Hayes's eyes. His network is going to rebuild. Another team is going to get hit. Maybe 2 teams, maybe 5, unless we end it here. She paused. I need him to come to me, Dante, and the only way to make him come to me is to convince him I have left. Hayes was quiet for a long time. Then he said, 8 hours. Yes. We sit here and breathe for 8 hours. We do what snipers do, Emily said. We wait. And they waited. The 8 hours that followed were the quietest Emily Carter had ever spent in a combat zone, and simultaneously the loudest, because the silence outside was filled to capacity by everything happening inside. She thought about the shot she was going to have to make when Haidari moved. She thought about distance and wind, and the way morning air in Afghanistan behaves differently from afternoon air. the thermal layers that develop as the sun heats the ground, the subtle drift that changes everything when you are working at extreme distance. She thought about variables and she managed them one by one, filing each one in the part of her mind where calculations lived. She also thought about something Hayes had said. He had said Haidari recognized her pattern, which meant Haidari had been studying engagements she was involved in, which meant he had access to information about operations she had been part of, which meant somewhere in the chain between her work and his knowledge, information had been crossing that should not have crossed. She filed that thought carefully. It was important. It was something that needed to be in the report she would write eventually in an office somewhere to people who would need to understand it. But right now, it was not the priority. Right now, the priority was staying still and staying silent and letting Tariq Haidari convince himself that the ghost had moved on. At 2:47 in the afternoon, Hayes touched her arm. She looked at him. He pointed at his radio, held up one finger. One transmission. She listened. Haidari, giving a direction to a subordinate, telling them the search teams had found nothing, telling them the counter-sniper had withdrawn. Hayes wrote it on the small notepad he kept for situations where spoken words were a liability. He slid it to Emily. Emily read it. She looked at her scope. She began running the final calculations. The command position was 1,060 meters out, much shorter than the earlier engagements, more manageable on paper, but paper did not account for the afternoon thermals, the crosswind developing from the northeast, the accumulated physical fatigue of 8 hours of motionless waiting in a position that was not built for comfort. She accounted for all of it. Hayes touched her arm again. Pointed movement at the command position. A vehicle arriving, 2 men getting out, then a third. The third man moved differently from the others. Deliberately. The way people move when they are accustomed to being in charge of the space around them. He went inside without hurrying, without looking around, with the specific confidence of a man returning to a place he considers his own. "Is that him?" Hayes whispered. Emily looked through the scope. She had studied photographs of Tariq Haidari for 8 days. She had memorized his posture, his build, the particular way he carried himself that showed up in every piece of imagery she had been given. The human body has a signature the way a rifle does. The way a person inhabits their own physical space is consistent in a way that cameras catch and trained observers learn to read. She read it. "That is him," she said. Hayes said nothing. He knew better than to say anything in this moment. Emily settled. This was the moment, the one the 8 days had been building toward, the one the 8 hours of silence had been purchased for. The calculation was complete. The variables were accounted for. There was nothing left to do that the mind could usefully do. She breathed. She found the space at the bottom of the breath. She thought briefly and involuntarily about David. Not grief, not urgency, just his face, the way it looked in a photograph she kept in a notebook, the way it had looked the last time she saw him in person, which was a year before he died when he was still so completely alive that death seemed like a category error when applied to him. She fired. The shot traveled 1,060 meters. She was already cycling when Hayes confirmed it. "Target is down," he said very quietly. Emily did not move immediately. She kept her scope on the command position. The 2 men who had come with Haidari were reacting, scrambling, looking in all directions for the source of a shot that had come from somewhere they had not thought to look. She put the second round into the communications equipment. Then she pulled back. The radio traffic on Haidari's frequency, which Hayes was still monitoring, went from organized to fragmented in the space of 90 seconds. Not panicked, but leaderless. The specific quality of disorganization that comes when the person who held everything together is suddenly absent and the parts are discovering they do not know how to cohere without him. Hayes looked at her. "It is done," he said. Emily was already breaking down her position. "The network is not done," she said. "Haidari is done. The network will find a new leader. It will take time. We have a window." She looked at Hayes. "We need to be in a position to report fully before that window closes." They moved. As they went, Hayes said quietly, 11 shots in the night engagement. 1 shot at the end of 8 hours. 12 shots total in a 14-hour window. And you are already thinking about the window before the next engagement. "Someone has to," Emily said. "Does it ever stop in your head? Does it ever actually stop?" Emily walked for several steps without answering. Then she said, "When I know everyone is home, It stops then. Hayes nodded. He did not ask any more questions. They moved through the fading afternoon toward the extraction point that command had established, and Emily Carter, who had just spent 14 hours keeping 12 Rangers alive from 2,000 meters away, walked with the same steady, unhurried pace she always walked with. And if you looked at her from a distance, you would not know what she had done, which was exactly the way she preferred it, because that was what a guardian did. Not show up in the light where everyone could see, show up in the dark where nobody could, and stay there until everyone got home. They reached the extraction point at 17 minutes past 4 in the afternoon. Nobody was there. Emily stood at the coordinates she had been given and looked at Hayes, and Hayes looked at his watch, and neither of them said anything for 30 seconds because 30 seconds was the margin of reasonableness before absence became a problem. At 31 seconds, Hayes keyed his radio. Command Shadow 6 at Extraction Point Alpha, requesting confirmation of pickup. Static, he tried again. More static. Emily was already scanning the surrounding area, not with her scope, but with her eyes, the wide peripheral awareness she had trained herself to maintain even when every instinct said to focus narrow. Nothing moved that should not move. Nothing was still that should be moving. The area felt empty in the genuine way, not the constructed way she had learned to distinguish over years of operating in places where empty was sometimes a performance. Try the secondary frequency, she said. Hayes switched. Tried again. This time the static had a different quality, the kind that suggested a signal struggling through interference rather than no signal at all. Then a voice, broken. Shadow 6, this is extract. Compromised. Say again, extraction. Alpha is... The signal dropped. Hayes looked at Emily. Compromised. I heard it, which means someone told them where Alpha was. Emily felt the same cold clarity she had felt in the seconds before every critical shot. Not fear, not panic, the specific mental state that comes when a situation becomes genuinely serious and the brain responds by becoming very, very quiet inside. We need to move. Right now. If Alpha is compromised, they may already have a team heading here. They moved. 3 blocks north, Hayes got a cleaner signal on the tertiary frequency. The voice on the other end was a communications sergeant named Dalton, who Emily had never spoken to before, but who had the compressed, efficient manner of someone who understood that every word in an emergency costs something. Shadow 6, we have a situation. Your extraction at Alpha was flagged by an internal security review 40 minutes ago. We believe your operational details were accessed by an unauthorized party inside the base. Emily stopped walking. Say that again clearly. Someone inside Bagram accessed your mission parameters. Extraction point timing route. We do not know yet who or how. QRF is being repositioned to Bravo Point, but there is a complication. Hayes said quietly. This is what Haidari knew. This is how he recognized your pattern. Someone was feeding him. Emily held up one finger. Not now. To Dalton. What is the complication at Bravo? Bravo Point is currently 12 kilometers from your position. You would need to move on foot through a sector that is now agitated following the engagement last night and this afternoon. We estimate it as passable but not clean. Additionally, Dalton paused in the specific way that meant what came next was worse than what had already been said. We have a developing situation at the base that may affect how quickly we can get a bird to Bravo. What developing situation? Ranger Team 41 came in this morning. I know, I was there when they left. Yes, ma'am. The thing is, Captain Walker submitted his after-action report approximately 2 hours ago. In that report, he made certain statements about Shadow 6, about what he observed, about the operational details. Another pause. His report went up the chain faster than normal because several people wanted to read it. And now there are people at this base who are asking questions that are making the base commander uncomfortable. And the base commander is asking questions that are making Colonel Reynolds uncomfortable. And Colonel Reynolds, Dalton, ma'am, is Reynolds okay? Colonel Reynolds is currently in a meeting with 3 people who outrank him, and he asked me to tell you if I reached you that he is handling it, and you should focus on getting to Bravo. Emily looked at Hayes. Hayes looked back with the expression of a man absorbing several pieces of bad news simultaneously and organizing them by priority. 12 kilometers, Emily said. On foot, through an agitated sector, with no support until we reach Bravo. Hayes said it without complaint, just laying it out. We have done worse. When Owen, Hayes thought about it, I will think of something. They moved. The 12 kilometers took 3 hours and 40 minutes. It would have taken less, but twice they had to stop and hold position while enemy patrols moved through areas they needed to cross, and once they had to backtrack a full kilometer because a route that appeared clear from a distance was not clear up close. Emily led and Hayes followed, and they spoke very little, only what the situation required. Short sentences that conveyed direction and threat and timing. The reduced language of two people who have worked together long enough that communication is mostly signal. During the second hold pressed into cover while a 6-man patrol passed 40 meters away, Hayes leaned close enough to speak directly into Emily's ear without producing sound that carried. The leak, he said. If it was inside Bagram, how long has it been running? Emily had been thinking about exactly this for the last 2 hours. She had been building a timeline in her head, cross-referencing what she knew about Haidari's operation with what she knew about the intelligence failures that had preceded it. The ambush on Team 41 required information about their route, their timing, their head count. That information was held in exactly 3 places before the mission launched: the mission planning cell, the communications section, and the command authorization chain. At least 6 months, she said. Maybe longer. The pattern of engagements in the sector over the last year, the precision of the attacks, the fact that Haidari always seemed to know which teams were moving where, that does not come from field observation alone. Field observation gives you general patterns. What Haidari had was specific data. Hayes absorbed this. Someone with real access. Someone with access to planning documents, not just patrol schedules, mission-specific details. That is a short list of people. Very short. The patrol passed, they moved again. At 6:47 in the evening, they reached Bravo Point. The helicopter was already there, rotors turning at idle, which meant someone had timed this correctly, and Emily made a note to find out who and thank them specifically, because gratitude that is not specific is not really gratitude. The crew chief helped her aboard with the particular respect that soldiers extend to other soldiers who have been in the field for an extended period, the recognition of shared experience that does not need to be spoken. Hayes came up behind her and the door closed and the helicopter lifted, and Emily looked down at the sector that had been her entire world for 18 days and felt the very specific feeling of a person who has completed something and is not yet sure what to do with the completion. She was still feeling it when the helicopter landed at Bagram. Reynolds was waiting on the tarmac, not with a crowd, not with the kind of reception that gets photographed and turned into a symbol. Just Reynolds standing alone in the particular posture of a man who has been in a difficult meeting for several hours and has come out the other side still standing, which is sometimes the best outcome available. He looked at Emily when she came down. She looked at him. You did it, he said. Haidari is down. The network is disrupted. You have a window of 6 to 8 weeks before they reorganize around a new leader. She handed him the notebook she had kept for 18 days. Every position, every observation, every pattern she had identified. Everything is in there. If you action it, in the next 72 hours, you can significantly degrade their remaining capacity. Reynolds took the notebook. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Emily. I meant the team, Walker's team. Emily said nothing. 11 casualties treated and released. Sergeant Kowalski will need surgery on the leg, but he will keep it. Sergeant Mitchell. Reynolds paused. Mitchell did not make it. I know. His family was notified this morning. Emily looked at the tarmac for a moment. She thought about the stuffed rabbit she did not know about. She thought about a 7-year-old girl who would not understand, not really, not for years, what the absence of her father was going to mean for the shape of her life. She thought about David. The rest came home, Reynolds said gently. One did not. Emily, she looked up. You saved 11 men last night. 11 men who would not have made it through that engagement without you. There is not a version of what happened where every outcome is good. You know that. I know that, she said. Knowing it and feeling it are two different things. Reynolds nodded. He had been in this conversation before in various forms with various soldiers. He knew better than to try to resolve it. Come inside, there are people who want to debrief you. The leak first, Emily said. Reynolds' expression did not change, which was itself informative. What do you know about that? I know Haidari recognized my pattern. I know he had specific information about Team 41's route and timing that could not have come from field observation. I know my extraction point was compromised before I reached it, which means someone with access to mission-specific planning data has been passing information. She watched Reynolds' face. You already know all of this. We have a security investigation underway. How long has it been underway? A pause. 48 hours. It started before Team 41's mission. Yes. Emily felt the anger that she had been managing carefully and professionally for the last 18 hours arrive fully formed. Not hot anger, the cold kind, the kind that does not make you loud but makes you very precise. You knew there was a potential leak and you still sent Walker's team in. We did not have confirmation. We had a flag, a pattern of possible information compromise that was still being assessed. And the assessment did not finish before the mission launched. No, Reynolds, she said his name the way he had said hers earlier as a wait, not a greeting. 12 men went onto that bridge. You had a flag. I know. One of them did not come back. Reynolds met her eyes and did not look away, which was the right thing to do and also was clearly costing him something. I know that too, he said. I will carry it. The silence between them was not comfortable. It was not supposed to be. Then Emily said, Who was it? We do not have confirmation yet. Who do you think it was? Reynolds looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, Captain Dennis Farrow, intelligence liaison. He had access to everything. Planning documents, patrol schedules, mission parameters, personnel assignments. He rotated into the role 8 months ago. He paused, which corresponds to when the pattern of compromised operations began. Emily ran through the name in her memory. She had no face to attach to it. She had never met a Captain Farrow, but she had spent 18 days in a sector that his information had made into a killing field, and somewhere in that sector, a 7-year-old girl's father had died because the bridge he crossed had been mined by people who knew he was coming. Where is he now? Emily said. In custody, as of 3 hours ago. She absorbed this. He will be prosecuted. Military justice. Yes. Will it matter? Reynolds looked at her. What do you mean Mitchell is still dead? The Rangers who almost died on that bridge last night are still going to wake up tomorrow with everything they saw last night. The people who lost people in the last 8 months, all the operations that were compromised. She stopped herself. I am asking if the prosecution will matter to the people it needs to matter to. Reynolds was quiet for a moment. It will matter, he said. Not enough, but it will matter. Emily nodded once. She started walking toward the building. Carter. She stopped. Walker wants to meet you, Reynolds said. Formally, he submitted a request this morning in his after-action report. He was very specific about it. Emily looked back at him. He included a request in his after-action report. He included 3 paragraphs about Shadow 6 in his after-action report and a formal request to meet the individual responsible for the survival of his team, which is what started the meeting I was in for 4 hours. Reynolds almost smiled. He is very persuasive in writing. What was the meeting about? People who are uncomfortable with certain aspects of last night's operation and would prefer that certain details remain internal to the unit. Emily understood what he was not saying. The optics. That word was used, yes. She turned fully around. And what did you tell them? Reynolds looked at her steadily. I told them that Staff Sergeant Emily Carter performed her mission with complete professionalism and extraordinary effectiveness, and that any attempt to minimize that performance for reasons unrelated to operational security would be something I was not willing to be part of. He paused. I also told them that Captain Walker's after-action report was already filed through official channels, and that the content of official after-action reports is not subject to informal revision. Emily looked at him for a moment. Thank you, sir. Do not thank me for doing the correct thing. That sets a low bar. He gestured toward the building. Go get cleaned up. Walker will be in the briefing room in an hour if you want to meet him. She went. The first thing Emily did was sit on the edge of a cot in the female quarters and not move for 4 minutes. She had been operating on something other than sleep for 31 hours, and the body has a way of presenting its invoice the moment it believes the immediate emergency is resolved. She did not sleep, but she allowed herself the 4 minutes, which was a form of permission she rarely extended to herself. Then she showered, changed into a clean uniform, sat at a small desk and began writing the report that she would submit through Reynolds before anything else happened. She wrote it with the same precision she brought to everything specific and sequenced and complete, because a report that is vague is a report that can be used to build a vague story, and she intended the story of what happened in that sector to be told with accuracy. She was finishing the second section when Hayes knocked on the door frame. She looked up. He was also cleaned up, in fresh clothes, looking like a man who had genuinely slept for some portion of the last several hours, which she envied him. "How are you?" he said, writing the report. "That is not what I asked." She set down the pen. "I am fine." "You are always fine." "Because I am always fine." Hayes sat down on a chair across from her and looked at her with the expression he used when he had decided to say something and was not going to be redirected. She recognized the expression and prepared accordingly. "The pattern thing," he said. "Haidari recognizing your pattern. It bothered you more than you let on. It was a significant tactical development." Emily. "It was not only a tactical development," she said after a pause. "It was—" She stopped, started again. "I have operated on the assumption that invisibility is achievable, that if I do the job correctly, I can remain unknown. That is partially a tactical assumption and partially—" She stopped again. "Partially something else. Something personal. Something that helps me do the job. Believing that what I do does not accumulate into something that can be seen. That every engagement is separate. That I am not leaving a signature." "But you are." "Apparently." Hayes leaned forward slightly. "Is that bad?" Emily thought about it honestly in a way she had not let herself think during the operational tempo of the last 24 hours. Haidari studied 14 engagements and identified a pattern that told him something about how I think, which means I have a style, which means I am not a ghost. She paused. "Which means I am a person who does it boo, and the work leaves traces, and those traces are part of a record that other people can read. And that is frightening. It is clarifying." Hayes waited. "A ghost cannot be thanked," Emily said, "cannot be blamed, cannot be asked to answer for decisions. A ghost is just absence." She looked at the desk. "I am not a ghost. I am a person who made 13 shots in 24 hours, and every one of them had a consequence, and I own every one of those consequences." Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "All 13 were the right call." "I know. You know, and you are still sitting here with the weight of them." "Yes. That is why you should be the one doing this job," Hayes said simply. "The people who would not feel the weight are the ones we cannot trust with the rifle." Emily looked at him. He had said something very similar to what Reynolds had said, and to what her mentor Daniel Hayes, his uncle, had said to her years ago in a different conversation in a different place. The same idea arriving from different directions. She was not sure yet what to do with the convergence, but she noted it. "Go meet Walker," Hayes said. "He deserves to say whatever he wants to say to you in person." "I know, and you deserve to hear it." She looked at him. "That is a different argument." "Yes, it is. It is also the true one." She finished the report, submitted it through the secure channel Reynolds had given her, and then she walked down the hallway toward the briefing room and stopped outside the door and stood there for a moment in a way she had not stood outside Reynolds' door 3 weeks ago. Not listening, just standing, preparing for something that was not a shot and not a calculation and not a tactical problem. Preparing for the specific difficulty of being seen by someone you protected. She knocked. "Come in." Ethan Walker was standing when she entered. He did not have to stand. He did not have to do anything in particular. He was standing because it was what his body did when the door opened, a reflex that had something to do with what the moment meant to him. He was taller than she expected. She was not sure why she had an expectation about his height. She had formed an image of him from his voice on the radio during the engagement, and voice does not reliably produce accurate physical images. He looked like someone who had not slept more than 4 hours in the last 36, which was appropriate because he had not. He had a cut above his left ear that someone had closed with 2 small strips of tape. He looked at her and did not say anything for 3 seconds. Then he said, "You are younger than I thought." Emily said, "You are taller than I thought." Something in his face changed. Not a smile exactly, more like the recognition of a register he could work in. "Captain Ethan Walker." "Staff Sergeant Emily Carter." I know who you are. He paused. I have known who you are since Reynolds showed me your file last night. I have been thinking about what I want to say to you since then. Another pause. I had a whole speech. What happened to it? You walked in and it did not seem right anymore. He looked at her directly. You were there for 6 hours before we arrived. Yes. You were watching us cross that bridge. Yes. You knew about the explosives. Emily was quiet for a moment. I knew there was an ambush prepared. I did not have complete information about the specific mechanism. The IED under the bridge was in a position I could not observe directly from my angle. Walker absorbed this. Mitchell, yes. If you had known about the specific position, I cannot answer that question, Emily said. Not reliably. I can tell you what I knew and what I did with what I knew. I cannot tell you what would have happened with different information because that is not a calculation I can make honestly. Walker looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. He had a daughter. I know. 7 years old. Her name is Sophie. Emily did not look away. She held that. Sophie, a 7-year-old girl named Sophie. She added it to what she carried, which was already more than people who have not done this work tend to imagine, and which she would carry, she knew for the rest of her life, the way you carry things that are true and heavy, and yours. I am sorry, she said, not as a formula, as a fact. Walker nodded. He took a breath. I have 11 other men who are alive because of you. Torres, Reeves, Kowalski, who is going to keep his leg, because your shot bought Doc the time to reach him. Santos, Huang, 7 others. He looked at her steadily. I spent 6 hours last night trying to figure out how to write that down in a way that was accurate. I do not think language does it. I do not think there is a sentence that captures what it means when someone you have never met decides to spend 6 hours in the dark to keep you alive. Emily said, I was doing my job. I know you were doing a risk of your job. I am doing mine right now. He held her gaze. My job right now is to look the person who saved my team in the eyes and say thank you in a way that means something. So, he held it. Thank you. From me, from 11 families who do not know your name. From people who are going to wake up tomorrow and not know how close it was. His voice was even throughout, controlled, but the control was working hard. Thank you. Emily looked at him for a moment. She had been thanked before, in various forms, with various levels of formality and emotion. She had learned over time to receive gratitude without deflecting it, because deflecting gratitude is a way of telling someone that what they felt is not valid, and she did not believe that. You held your team together, she said, in a situation designed to make that impossible. I watched you do it. Whatever I did from 2,000 meters, you did it from inside. She paused. That matters. Walker looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly conversational. Then he said, Reynolds told me there is a leak investigation underway. Yes. Farrow. Reynolds told you. Reynolds told me enough. Walker's jaw tightened. He had access to every mission I ran in the last 8 months. Every patrol schedule. Every route. He stopped. Mitchell, the men we lost in October, the ambush in February that cost us 2 Rangers and put 3 more in the hospital. He stopped again. That was all him. Probably. Probably, Walker said, and there was something in the word that contained everything a person might feel when they learn that the losses they have carried were not random, not the uncontrollable cost of a dangerous profession, but the result of a specific human choice made by someone who sat in the same building. Walker, Emily said. He looked at her. What happens to Farrow is not your responsibility. What you do with your team from here is. She said it not as comfort, but as fact. You know that. He was quiet for a moment, then, my team wants to know more about you. Reeves in particular. He calculated your distances from the sound delay. He has been talking about it all day. What did he calculate? He said the longest shot was somewhere around 1,800 meters. Emily said nothing. He said it is not possible. He calculated correctly. Walker looked at her. But you said, I said nothing, Emily said. He said it is not possible. I said he calculated correctly. Walker understood, a slow nod. You are going to be impossible to have a straightforward conversation with, aren't you? I am having one right now. He almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. The something in his face that was not a smile came close to becoming one. I would like to buy you a cup of terrible base coffee, he said, if you have time. Emily looked at him. She thought about the report she had submitted, the notebook she had given Reynolds, the investigation that was underway, the network that had been disrupted, the window of 6 to 8 weeks before it reorganized, the work that was not finished and would not be finished and would never be finished in any complete sense, because this was not the kind of work that finished it, was the kind of work that continued, and the people who did it continued with it. And the only thing you could do was be good enough on any given night that more people came home than did not. She thought about all of that. Then she said, I have time. They walked out of the briefing room together, a ranger captain and a sniper who had kept each other's voices alive through 13 hours of darkness. And the hallway they walked down was lit with the specific flat light of a forward operating base at 9 in the evening. And it was completely ordinary. And it was in the way that ordinary moments sometimes are after extraordinary ones, almost unbearably good to be in. Hayes was in the corridor when they came out. He looked at Emily, looked at Walker, looked at the direction they were heading. Coffee, he said. Terrible coffee, Walker confirmed. Hayes fell into step without being invited because Hayes always knew when he was included without being told, which was one of the many reasons Emily had chosen him. They turned the corner. Behind them, in a secure room 3 hallways away, Captain Dennis Farrow sat across a table from 2 investigators and was beginning to understand that the things he had told himself about his choices were not going to survive contact with the specificity of what those choices had cost. And in a house in North Carolina, a woman named Claire Mitchell was putting her 7-year-old daughter Sophie to bed, and Sophie was asking when Daddy was coming home, and Claire was giving an answer that she had practiced, but that still in the actual moment of saying it did not come out the way she had rehearsed. Emily Carter did not know any of this in the quarter, but she carried it anyway, because that is what it costs to do the job right. And she had never once pretended it cost anything less. The coffee was exactly as terrible as Walker had promised. Emily drank it anyway, both hands around the cup, sitting across from Walker and Hayes at a small table in the corner of the base dining facility where the overhead light flickered every 40 seconds with the reliability of something broken that nobody had gotten around to fixing. It was 9:30 in the evening, and the facility was mostly empty, and nobody bothered them, which was the specific gift that exhaustion and rank in the visible evidence of a long field operation give you in a place like this. Walker talked about his team, not in the formal way of an after-action debrief, but in the way a person talks when they have been holding something for a long time and have finally found someone they can put it down in front of. He talked about Torres, who had been shot at close range through a vehicle door 3 months ago and had come back to the unit 6 weeks later against medical advice and never mentioned it. He talked about Reeves, 24 years old, who was writing letters to Mitchell's daughter, Sophie, had been writing them since the helicopter ride back 3 letters already, which nobody had asked him to do and nobody had told him to stop. He talked about Kowalski, who had been awake when they brought him into the medical bay and had asked immediately about the rest of the team before asking about his own leg and how that specific detail had done something to Walker that he was still working out. Emily listened. She did not offer anything in return, not immediately, because Walker was not asking for a trade. He was doing what people do after they have survived something they were not supposed to survive. He was making it real by saying it out loud to someone who had been there. Hayes refilled his own coffee and mostly stayed quiet, which was his contribution to the conversation, and it was the right one. At some point, Walker said, Reeves wants to meet you. You mentioned that. He is not going to stop wanting to until it happens. He has a specific quality where he decides something is important and it stays important until it is resolved. It is useful in a firefight and relentless everywhere else. Walker looked at her. He calculated your distances. He wrote them down. He has been showing them to people all day. What do people say? Some of them say he calculated wrong. Some of them say the sound delay data is unreliable under engagement conditions. Walker paused. Reeves does not argue with them. He just shows them the numbers again. Emily looked at her coffee cup. He calculated correctly. I know. The distance on the shot that cleared your extraction route was shorter, under 1,400. The first shot the machine gun that was the longest. Walker was quiet for a moment. Why are you telling me that? Because Reeves is going to keep showing people those numbers, and some of them are going to keep saying he is wrong. It will help him to know he is not. Walker looked at her for a long moment. You could tell him yourself. Emily said nothing. I am serious. Come meet the team. Not formally, no ceremony. Just come. He held her gaze. They are not going to ask you for anything except to exist in the same room with them for 30 minutes. That is all. She looked at Hayes. Hayes looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had no opinion on the subject whatsoever, which was a lie, and they both knew it. Tomorrow, Emily said. Tonight, I need to sleep. Walker nodded. He accepted it without pushing, which told her something about how he led. He said, I will tell Reeves. They finished the coffee. Walker stood to leave and then stopped his hand on the back of the chair and looked at Emily with something that was not the careful professionalism of the last hour, but something older and less managed. Mitchell's wife, he said, Claire, she is going to receive his personal effects next week. His pack was recovered. Everything in it. He stopped. There is a stuffed rabbit in there. For Sophie. He bought it from a vendor outside the base. He was worried it would get crushed. Emily looked up at him. It is fine, Walker said. Perfectly fine. Floppy ears and everything. His voice was steady with the specific steadiness of someone who has decided to be steady and is doing it through force of will. I am going to deliver it personally, drive to their house in North Carolina, and put it in Sophie's hands. He paused. I do not know why I am telling you this. Emily said, because you needed to say it to someone who was there. He looked at her. Yeah, he said quietly. That is exactly why. He left. Hayes watched him go. Then he looked at Emily and said nothing, which was also the right thing. Emily finished her coffee. It had gone cold. She drank the last of it anyway. Then she went to sleep for 11 hours, which was the longest continuous sleep she had managed in 6 weeks. And she did not dream, or if she did not remember it. And when she woke up, the first thing she thought about was not the shots and not Haidari and not the extraction and not Pharaoh. She thought about Sophie Mitchell, 7 years old, a stuffed rabbit with floppy ears waiting in a pack to make its way home. She lay in the dark for 3 minutes. Then she got up and went to work. The meeting with Reynolds happened at 8 in the morning and ran for 2 hours. It was not a debrief in the traditional sense. It was more like the kind of conversation that happens when an operation produces outcomes that do not fit neatly into existing frameworks, and the people responsible for the frameworks need to decide what to do about that. Reynolds had 3 other people in the room. 2 of them Emily had never met. One of them was a colonel named Patricia Weston, who ran a program that Emily had heard of, but never had direct contact with a program that existed in the specific space between conventional and special operations that rarely appeared in official documentation. Weston watched Emily throughout the meeting with the focused attention of someone conducting an ongoing assessment, which Emily recognized and did not find uncomfortable. She had been assessed her entire career. She was comfortable with it. The third person was the general from Reynolds' office 3 weeks ago, the one who had used the word optics. He did not use that word today. He sat at the end of the table and listened and asked 2 questions, both of which were specific and intelligent, and Emily answered both directly. By the end of the meeting, his expression had completed the recalibration that had begun when she walked into Reynolds' office 3 weeks earlier, and whatever he had come in thinking about the person across the table from him, he was leaving with something different. Emily did not need his revised opinion, but she noted its revision anyway because information is information. At the end of the meeting, Weston leaned forward and said, Staff Sergeant Carter, I want to ask you something directly. Yes, ma'am. What you did in that sector over 18 days, and specifically what you did in the 14-hour engagement window, represents a level of performance that very few people in any branch could have replicated. I have been doing this work for 22 years, and I can count the people I have seen perform at that level on one hand. She paused. What I want to know is what you want to do next. Emily looked at her. Next meaning what specifically, ma'am? Next meaning the rest of your career. You have options that most people in your position do not have. Program expansions, training roles, operational command tracks. Weston looked at her steadily. I am not asking what the Army needs you to do. I am asking what you want. The room was quiet. Emily thought about it honestly in the space Weston had given her, without filling the silence with the first available answer. She thought about what she had felt on the helicopter coming out of the sector. the feeling of completion that did not know what to do with itself. She thought about Hayes and his Uncle Daniel, who had retired and gone back to Fort Liberty to teach, and who had told her years ago that the job of the best soldiers is not to keep fighting forever, but to build the next people who will fight when you cannot. She thought about young snipers at ranges learning wind calculations with nobody beside them, who had made the real calculation under real conditions and come out the other side. She thought about Sophie Mitchell, who was 7 years old. She thought about what it would mean to make sure that the next time a team walked onto a bridge in the dark, the person watching over them from 2,000 meters was as good as she could make them. Trainings, Emily said. I want to go back to Fort Liberty and build the next generation of precision operators. Weston looked at her. Something in Weston's expression settled like a question that had found its answer. Reynolds said quietly, Daniel Hayes built you. Yes, sir. And you want to be what he was for you. I want to be better than he was, Emily said, because he built me and I should be better than my teacher. And whoever I build should be better than me. She paused. That is how it is supposed to work. The meeting ended. The visit to Walker's team happened at 11 that morning and lasted not 30 minutes, but 2 hours, which Emily had not planned for and which was not uncomfortable. Reeves met her at the door of the team room with the energy of someone who had been waiting and was not going to pretend otherwise. He was exactly as young as Walker had described him, babyface and old eyes, holding a notebook with numbers in it that he had been showing to people all day. He handed it to her without preamble. Tell me where I am wrong. Emily looked at the notebook. His calculations were precise and his methodology was sound and his final numbers were very close to accurate. She took a pen from her pocket and made 2 small corrections to his atmospheric compensation figures. She handed it back. Reeves looked at the corrections, then at her. So I was close. You were very close. But the distance is real. The distance is real. He sat down on the nearest available surface, which happened to be the floor, and looked at the corrected numbers with the expression of someone who has just had a belief confirmed that they were half afraid to have confirmed. I kept telling people, he said. They kept saying the sound data was corrupted by the engagement conditions. Sound data under engagement conditions has increased variance, Emily said. Your corrections for that variance were slightly conservative, which is why your numbers are a little short. But your methodology was right. Reeves looked up. Why does that matter, the methodology? Because a correct answer produced by incorrect reasoning is an accident. A correct answer produced by correct reasoning is a skill. She looked at him. You want to be a skill, not an accident. He stared at her for a moment. Then Torres appeared from across the room. Is she teaching already? She has been here 4 minutes. 3 minutes, Hayes said from behind Emily, because Hayes had come along without being asked which was correct. Torres shook his hand at Emily. You are going to be a complicated person to have around. I am not staying, Emily said. No, Torres said. Where are you going? Fort Liberty, training role. The room absorbed this. Several of the Rangers who had been in the engagement were present sitting or standing in the loose way that soldiers occupy a room when they are off duty, but not fully at ease. And the news that Emily was not staying, that she was going somewhere else, produced a visible reaction that was not dramatic, but was present. Kowalski, his leg extended in front of him on an elevated surface, said, So you save us and then you leave? Yes, Emily said, just like that. Someone has to go build the next person who saves the next team. Would you rather I stayed here, or would you rather the team after you has someone watching over them? Kowalski considered this seriously. Can we have both? No. That is a bad deal. Most good things are. Walker was standing at the back of the room. He had not spoken since Emily arrived. He watched the exchange between Emily and his team with the expression of a man watching something that he does not fully have words for, but recognizes as significant. When the room settled, he said, Before you go, there is something the team wanted to do. Emily looked at him. He nodded to Reeves. Reeves reached behind him and produced a piece of paper that had been folded once. He unfolded it carefully. It was the original copy of his calculations, the handwritten version, not a copy. He had signed it at the bottom, and every member of Ranger Team 41 who had been present at the engagement had signed it below him. 12 names, 11 who made it out and 1 who did not. Mitchell's name was at the bottom in Reeves's handwriting, added separately from the others. Reeves held it out to Emily. She took it. She looked at the 12 names for a long moment. She looked at Mitchell's name added by Reeves's hand because Mitchell could not add it himself, and she felt the weight of that specific decision, the choice to include him, the understanding that he had been on that bridge too, and that his name belonged on anything that recorded what happened there. She folded the paper, put it in her pocket. She did not have a speech. She was not a person who made speeches. But she said "you held," which was what Ethan Walker had told Command when they asked if his team could survive, and everyone in that room knew what it meant and what it had cost. That was enough. She left Fort Liberty 6 days later. The court-martial proceedings against Captain Dennis Farrow began the following month. Emily submitted a written statement through the Military Justice Channel and was not required to appear in person. The statement ran to 11 pages and was specific in every detail that was relevant and silent on every detail that was not. She had been told by the attorney coordinating the case that it was one of the clearest and most complete witness statements he had received in 19 years of military law. She was not surprised. She had been making precise statements her whole career. The medium was different. The principle was the same. Farrow was convicted on 6 counts. The sentencing included a dishonorable discharge and a prison term that the people in that courtroom argued about for 2 days before reaching a number. Emily did not attend the sentencing. She was at Fort Liberty by then, standing on a range at 7 in the morning, with 9 young soldiers who had been selected for advanced precision training, watching them take positions and thinking about everything wrong with what she was seeing. She walked down the line and corrected each one. Not harshly, not with the kind of instruction that makes a person feel stupid for not knowing something they were never taught. With the kind of instruction that gives a person the specific feeling of a thing clicking into place. She had learned this from Daniel Hayes, who had learned it from someone before him, and the line went back further than any of them could trace. She got to the end of the line and came back to the front. "Again," she said. "They shot again. Better. Again. Better still." One of them, a young corporal named Vasquez, was making a consistent error in her breathing pattern that was costing her a significant margin at distance. Emily watched her for 3 iterations. Then she walked over and stood beside her and said nothing for a moment. Vasquez looked at her. "Your exhale is incomplete," Emily said. "You are stopping at 40% through because you are trying to control the moment. You cannot control the moment. You can only prepare for it and then let it happen." Vasquez looked back through her scope. "How do I fix it?" "Stop trying to control what cannot be controlled and start trusting what you have prepared." "That is not very specific instruction, Staff Sergeant." "No," Emily agreed. "It is not, but it is the specific instruction that applies to your specific problem. The technical correction is easy. The mental correction is the one that matters." She paused. "Breathe out completely. Trust the preparation. Fire." Vasquez looked through her scope. She breathed out. She fired. The round hit 2 centimeters from center at 800 meters, which was the best shot she had made in 3 weeks of training, and she knew it from the impact report before Emily said anything. Emily said nothing, which was the best possible response because it told Vasquez that what had just happened was not an exception. It was not luck. It was the result of something she had just understood, and understanding it meant she could do it again, and doing it again meant it was hers. Vasquez fired again, 1 centimeter from center. Emily moved on down the line. Hayes was watching from the edge of the range. He had come with her to Fort Liberty because that was what Hayes did, which was follow Emily Carter into whatever came next, not from obligation, but from the specific choice of a person who has found work that matters and a partner who does it right and has decided that combination is worth staying close to. He watched her work through all 9 shooters. He watched the way she moved through the line, unhurried, precise, giving each person exactly what they needed, and not one word more, the way a good teacher gives you the tool and then stands back and lets you use it. When the morning session ended and the shooters went to debrief, Hayes walked over and stood beside her. She was looking at the range. He said, "Daniel would have liked watching that. He would have criticized my grip instruction. He criticized everyone's grip instruction. It was basically his hobby." Emily almost smiled. "Almost. How is he?" "Good. He is good. He says to tell you that the program you are building is the right program and to stop trying to teach everyone everything at once. He knows about the program." "Emily, he has known about everything you have done for the last 4 years. He tracks you like you track targets. Hayes paused. He is proud of you. He does not use that word. He says things like the program design is sound and her methodology is improving, which for Daniel Hayes means exactly the same thing. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I want to visit him. He would like that. When I have the first cohort to a place where I can leave them for a week without everything falling apart. 6 weeks, Hayes estimated. Maybe 8. 6, Emily said. Vasquez is going to pull the others up faster than I expected. Hayes looked at the range where Vasquez had shot. How good is she going to be? Emily looked at the distance marker. 800 meters. Vasquez had put her last 3 rounds inside a 10-centimeter group at that distance on her first proper session after the breathing correction. She had done it quietly without drama, the way naturally gifted people often do things, as if the difficulty others experience simply does not apply to them. Better than me, Emily said. Hayes looked at her. You really believe that? I do not see the point of building someone who peaks below where I peaked. What would be the purpose of that? Hayes thought about it. Most people do not actively try to be surpassed. Most people are building something for themselves, Emily said. I am building something for the soldiers they are going to protect. That is a different project with a different measure of success. Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Reeves wrote to you. Emily looked at him. He sent a letter through Reynolds. It arrived yesterday. Hayes handed her an envelope. I have not read it. She took it. She did not open it immediately. She held it and thought about a 24-year-old soldier sitting on a helicopter writing letters that nobody asked him to write because something in him understood that certain things need to be said, and the world does not always provide the right moment, so you have to create it. She opened the letter. Reeves wrote the way he talked, directly without preamble, in short sentences that said exactly what they meant. He told her that the team was operational again. He told her that Torres had been promoted. He told her that Kowalski had passed the physical evaluation for return to duty and had cried during the test, which Kowalski would deny to anyone who asked. He told her that Walker had gone to North Carolina and delivered the stuffed rabbit to Sophie Mitchell in person, and that Sophie had named the rabbit after her father and slept with it every night, and that Walker had called Reeves from the drive home and not said very much at all but had needed to call someone. At the bottom of the letter, in handwriting that was slightly different from the rest, as if he had paused before writing it, Reeves said, We do not know how to repay what you did. We have decided to stop trying to repay it and start trying to deserve it instead. I think that is what you would tell us to do if we asked. I think that is the right answer. Emily folded the letter, put it in her pocket beside the piece of paper with 12 signatures. She looked at the range. Empty now. Quiet. She thought about this bridge in Kandahar. The 6 seconds of silence before everything collapsed. The voice on the radio that was hers that she had put into that frequency because she had made a promise, not out loud, not to anyone who could hold her to it, but the kind of promise that holds itself. She thought about Mitchell, about Sophie, about a rabbit with floppy ears that had made a journey it was not supposed to make and arrived where it was supposed to arrive, because Walker was the kind of man who drove to North Carolina and put things in the right hands. She thought about Vasquez, who was going to be better than her, and the soldier after Vasquez, who would be better than Vasquez, and the long line of people stretching forward into a future that Emily would never fully see, each one a little sharper, and a little more prepared, and a little more capable of being in the right place at the right moment for someone who needed them. She thought about what her mentor Daniel Hayes had told her years ago in a different place when she was young enough to think that being good at something was mostly about the thing you were good at. He had told her the rifle is not powerful because of what it can destroy. It is powerful because of what it can protect. She had carried those words everywhere since then. She carried them now. She turned away from the range and walked back toward the building where 9 young soldiers were waiting to learn what came next. There was more work to do. There was always more work to do. And Emily Carter, who had stepped into a war zone with a rifle when 12 Rangers whispered that they needed a savior, walked through the door and got back to it. Not because anyone asked, because it was hers to do. And she had never once put down something that was hers to do.